In this video, we're going to continue our discussion of specimens, and we are going to create a new table called specimens in our database, and we're going to create a new Hibernate mapping file as well. Now, we've already created a table before, and that is plants. The only really new thing we're going to define here is the many side of a one-to-many relationship. So we're going to add a foreign key to this table, and that foreign key will be the plant ID from the plants table. So let's take a look. I'm going to go into phpMyAdmin on the virtual machine, and I'm going to take a look at the plant places schema, and I'm just going to remind myself what the plants table looks like. Notice that all of the columns are capitalized, plant_ID. Okay, that is the name of the unique ID for the plant table. So I'm going to go back to the plant places schema, and I'm going to choose create table, and we're going to say specimens. Number of columns, well, let's see, we can always add and remove, so we're going to need specimen ID, plant ID, latitude, longitude, planted date, or date planted, and planted by. So that's a total of about 6 columns if I'm counting correctly. I'll choose 6, although actually we talked about doing a legacy as well. We could always add that legacy information. Let's go ahead and put 7 columns, and I'm going to choose go. Again, we've seen this part before, so no big surprise here. Let's start off caps lock and say specimen ID. So this is a unique identifier for the specimen table. Default, that's fine. And we're going to say not null, we'll leave that unchecked. Indexed, we'll say primary. And then auto increment. Okay. Next one, we're going to say plant ID, which is our foreign key to the plant table. Type int is fine again. I'm going to say this one can't be null. I'm going to go ahead and leave that one as not null. Index, we could put an index on here, but we'll go ahead and leave that blank as it is now. So we'll just add a couple more columns then. We're going to say latitude. Oops. And latitude is going to be a varchar. Honestly, latitude won't be more than, it's not going to be more than about 10 characters. We'll go ahead and put a limit of 60. Longitude. Varchar again, and 60. Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to say planted by, and we're going to say Varchar again. Okay, 255. Whoops, whoa, what happened there? I had a little interruption, but I've recovered from it, and I've taken us back to where we were. So we're going to say planted by, and then I'm going to say planted date. We'll go ahead and make this one a varchar for the moment. We can make it a date if we want to at some point, but just to make it easy, we're going to keep it as a varchar at the moment. 60 characters should be more than enough. The last column I'm going to add is description. Maybe we want to have just some free text. So for that, I'll simply say varchar, or we could do text, it doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and keep it as text, that'll work. Okay, and one thing is, I'm going to check everything that can be nullable. So that's everything except for our primary and foreign key. And you know what? We'll go ahead and say description. Yeah, that's good. I feel like I want to keep this as a varchar. Let's keep things consistent. Make it a varchar 255. That's a little short for a description. It looks like I also misspelled it. But again, we'll just keep things like that. Keep it simple. Description. As a matter of fact, I'm going to check all of my other spellings right now. Everything looks good. So I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to say save. Okay, and we have a table called specimens. So now let's go back and let's go to our DTO, and we see we have our plant.hbm.xml. That's going to be very similar to what we're doing for our specimen. So I'm simply going to right click and choose copy. And then I'm going to right click on the DTO package and choose paste. Okay, and we're going to call this one specimen.hbm. Specimen.hbm.xml, and choose OK. Okay, let's look at specimen and see what we need to change. I'm going to put my cursor in this, Control M. And let's see, first of all, the class name we're going to change from plant to specimen. The table from plants, we're going to change that to specimens as well. And then the catalog is that the entire database, that is still going to be plant places. Okay, ID. Did we make an ID field? We did. We made it ID. Probably could make that global unique identifier or GUID. As long as we've already made it ID, we'll go ahead and keep it like so. So let's say ID name, that's our unique identifier. We're going to just call it ID. And then the column name in the database is going to be specimen ID. Okay, now from now on we're going to say property name. Let's take a look at our specimen.java. We have plant ID, latitude, longitude, planted by, planted date, and let me go ahead while I'm here. Let me go ahead and add a new attribute, private string description. Okay, Control 1, and we'll say create getter and setter. So now this very closely matches what I have in the database. Okay, plant ID is our foreign key, latitude, longitude, planted by, planted date description. Well, let me go back and save that. Okay, and we'll go ahead and terminate the server, that's fine. Okay, so plant ID, we're going to say type Java lang integer. Okay, column, we're going to say plant underscore ID. Everything else I think we can get rid of here. And that's just our foreign key to the plant table. Okay, next we're going to have latitude. String is fine on that. Column name, latitude. And I think we said length of 60 for latitude. I think you see where this is going. So to save a bit of time, I'm going to pause the recording and finish this up, and then unpause it once it's finished. Just a moment. Now you see we have latitude, longitude, planted by, planted date, and description. Again, very simple, varchar 255, very straightforward. I'm going to just make a double check because I did copy paste this. Do I have anything named plant that I don't want? And it looks like I'm okay. I want to make sure I didn't have any leftovers there. So a very simple Hibernate mapping, and I save. Now, it'd be very easy to forget the next step. We do not want to forget the next step. What is that? We've created this file. We want to include it within the Hibernate config. So Control M. That's probably the easiest thing to forget when you make the mapping file. Don't forget to add it to the configuration. So Control C and Control V. And we're going to change it from plant.hbm.xml to specimen.hbm.xml. So hibernate.cfg.xml is the core configuration file for Hibernate. We're going to put things like our database connection in here, so we only have to specify it in this one file. In old school Java, we had to put each of these details every single time we wanted to do something with the database. Naturally, the trick is, what if we move our database to a different machine, which is common? We might have a QA database and maybe a test database and a development database and a production database. With Hibernate, with having everything in this one file, it makes it very easy for us to change everything only one time in one place if needed. So after we have our database connection information, then we're going to include the specimen.hbm.xml, and I'm going to choose Save. Okay, let's go back to the specimen VO, which has this save handler here. Okay, if you remember in our previous video, we saw that the specimen was updated with all the information we had on that form. But there is one that we do need to manually set, and that is that plant ID. So let's say set the foreign key to plant ID before saving. Okay, and I'm going to say specimen.set plant ID, and we're going to say plant.getGUID. Okay, now this is an important step because you see that the unique identifier for the plant serves as the foreign key for the specimen. So it's important to see that connection that we've made on line number 40. Now what do we do? Well, we need to do all that infrastructure to start a Hibernate session and then to save this information. And we've already done some things that we can borrow. If I recall correctly, it was in search plant. But actually what we did is we delegated down to the plant service. Or, I'm sorry, I might have the wrong file. It was actually in add plant. So we have a plant service.save_plant. We can expand this and make a plant service.save_specimen by simply overloading that save method, or we can make a separate specimen service. But since the service layer is really a business logic class, and that is aggregating different DAOs together, let's go ahead and keep it with the same plant service. So I'm going to Control-Shift-R, and I'm going to say plant service. Remember, we're going down to our business logic layer now. And let's see, we have a save. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so I'm going to say public void save specimen throws exception. Okay, so a business logic layer aggregates information, Control-Shift-O to organize imports, aggregates information from several DAOs. Now it would feel tempting to take this save method and to copy plant DAO.insert plant. But really, once we get below the business logic layer, we should have a different DAO for each table we're persisting to. The business logic layer, anything above that doesn't need to know about the persistence framework or hierarchy, doesn't need to know about the tables. So in other words, the UI layer doesn't need to know about every individual table. But the DAO layer does. And all of that information, all of that separate information comes together in the business logic layer, which is why we have a business logic layer. So I'm going to hold this thought for just a moment. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to refactor and pull up to put this into the plant service interface. That's fine. So we'll synchronize the interface with the implementation class. We're going to leave this implementation alone for just a moment. Okay, and save, and we're good. Okay. And now what we're going to do is Control-M, and we're going to go to the DAO layer. Our DAO currently has our Hibernate util, and an iPlant DAO, and a plant HBM DAO, along with several others. So we don't need to stub things out now. We're in our second sprint. So I'm going to right-click on com.plantplaces.dao. I'm going to say New, and then we're going to say Java class. And for this one, we're going to say Specimen DAO. So remember, at the DAO layer, we're typically going to have one DAO for each table that we're saving to. There might be some closely related tables that can go into the same DAO, but each DAO should represent an entity or a concept in the database. So I say specimen DAO, and then I say finish. And we're probably going to want to do an update and a delete and a fetch. But for the moment, I'm just going to say public void insert specimen throws exception. Remember that DTO called specimen, the reason why we have a DTO is we want a way to transfer data across all three of our layers. So then we save, Control-Shift-O, organize imports, then save again, and hopefully, yep, there we go, that takes care of our compile error. Now at this point we can borrow some of the boilerplate stuff from plant hbm.xml. And anytime we see copy-paste, we might want to think, is there a better way to do this? And we will think of maybe a superclass insert method that we can make that handles this begin transaction and commit. Let's keep that in mind. We don't need to do it right now, but it is something that we might want to keep in mind as kind of a take all the heavy lifting of getting the Hibernate util and begin transaction commit. Let's take that away so all we have to worry about is the save method. But again, we will think about that when the time comes. So I go back to specimen DAO and I'm going to paste. And instead of saving a plant, we're going to save a specimen. You see how easy this becomes when we get the framework down of our Hibernate utility. Okay, and save. I am going to do a bit of refactor to keep things consistent. I'm going to right click and I'm going to refactor and rename this to specimen hbm.xml, because the plant hbm.xml, actually, you know what? I'm going to do that in 2 steps. Hang on one second. The first thing I'm going to do is save. After that, I'm going to right click and choose refactor and choose extract interface. An interface isn't necessarily a lot of work. You can write the class first, that's okay, and then extract the interface when you're happy with the class. So interface name, iSpecimen DAO, and OK. Good. Now with that done, you see we have a C reference here. This is great. I love that. The @C reference means I don't need my own Java doc at the class level. I just need the Java doc at the interface level, which is a better place to put it. Why is that? Well, first of all, the implementation, how it works, shouldn't matter. The method should be described in Java doc just at the method level, and that's something you're going to see in the interface. Number 2, one of the values of JavaDoc is a lot of times if you're going to invoke a method in an IDE, the IDE will give you a preview of what that JavaDoc looks like. And variable types should almost always be interfaces. So it's more important to have the JavaDoc on the interface than to have it on the implementing class. Probably wouldn't hurt to put a little JavaDoc up at this class level. But first of all, let me refactor. Oh, come on. Let me see if it'll let me do it here. Let me refactor and rename. And we're going to call this specimen hbm.xml. Just keep it consistent with our plant hbm.xml. Yeah, that's good. And enter. Okay. Now what I will do at the class level, I'll put a little JavaDoc up here that just says a Hibernate persistence implementation of our specimen DAO. Okay, everything else looks good. I'm going to choose Save. Now with this information, I can go back to my business logic layer, which remember, that's what aggregates things for us. That's what aggregates all of these individual DAOs. Go back to my business logic layer, and I am going to complete the save method. For the save method, I need an instance of that specimen hbm.xml or any DAO that implements the iSpecimen DAO. So let me make another one of these lines. I'm going to say private iSpecimen DAO and then specimen DAO. Terminate with a semicolon. Control-Shift-O, organize imports. Control-S, save. @inject means I want Spring to handle this dependency for me. Notice again in this entire web application, we have not called a constructor once. Okay. Now we go back down to our save method. And in our save method, I'm going to say specimen DAO. And then dot insert, Notice that it requires a specimen as a parameter. So specimen DAO insert specimen. There we go. And save. Probably would be a good idea to put some Javadoc here, or at least on the interface iPlant service. Another thing we should really do once we get comfortable that it is saving correctly, it's worthwhile doing maybe a few validation checks either here or back in our user interface. One or the other, probably a good idea. Let's go ahead and save it where we are right now. And with this, I can go to the specimen vo.java. Make sure I have my wiring correct there. Okay, specimen.setPlantID. So remember, now we're in the user interface layer. So it looks like I have a little bit more I need to do. First of all, in the user interface layer, I'm going to need a reference to iPlant service. Plant service. Okay, we're going to want to inject that. So use our Spring annotation to inject that. Control-Shift-O, organize imports. Control-S to save. Now we'll go back down and we're going to invoke our specimen. Plant service. .save. And pass in our specimen. And terminate with a semicolon. And save. Okay, what doesn't it like? Probably it's going to not like that it has an unhandled exception. Let's surround with try catch. Okay, and the catch block, we will call one of those growls. So remember that growl, we can say, hey, something went wrong with saving. Just footnote that. We'll come back to that. And what we'll do is I'm going to take this return statement, and I'm going to put it in the one place where I know it will be called only if the save was successful. Remember that if the save is successful on line 47, it's going to go to line 48 and skip the catch block. If the save is unsuccessful on line 47, it's going to skip line 48 and go straight to the catch block. So it's kind of like a conditional test. So I'm going to put the return right up here and save. Okay. Now in the catch, I might say return failed or didn't save, something like that. So that means something went wrong. So you see, we're only going to go here if the save was successful. We're only going to go here if the save was not successful. But the truth is we'll probably throw a growl up in that point. We'll go ahead and leave the breakpoint, and I'm going to choose save. And at this point, I believe I've done everything I need to do to save this specimen to the database. So I'm going to pause the video just a moment, rebuild everything, and we're going to watch it go. Now, while the video was paused, I did a dry run and I realized I did miss one thing. The specimen hbm DAO, I had to put on the named annotation, and I knew I needed to do that. I just plain old forgot. Why do I need the named annotation? Well, specimen hbm DAO implements iSpecimen DAO. Let's go back to our friend called plant service and let's look at what's going on up here. Plant service has an inject for iSpecimen DAO. That means somewhere in the world in this project there has to be a class that either has a named attribute where it specifies this name explicitly or the variable name explicitly, or it is of this type, the interface type, or it implements this type. It has to meet one of those rules. And because the specimen hbm DAO does implement iSpecimen DAO, it meets one of those four rules. So I had to put the named annotation here, just like a puzzle piece, or you think two train cars coming together, they have to match up, right? So this is one half of that matchup, and the other half of the matchup is what we're going to see on plant service, which is the inject. So as soon as I do that, I restart. Now because I did do a dry run just to make sure it works, you see I ran this query against phpMyAdmin, and you see select star from specimens. It has the specimen that I've already entered. That's specimen ID 1, that's our auto increment. Plant ID 13, that's our foreign key to the plants table. We'll look at that in just a minute. Latitude 4444, longitude 5555, planted by me. Planted date is October 18th, which is not only the date I am recording this video, but guess what? It's my birthday. So let's take a look at what plant ID 13 is. Look at plants. And we should be able to find this pretty quickly. That's our Pleasant Ridge white oak. So let's add another specimen, because the whole idea of a specimen is that concept of one-to-many. One plant can have many specimens. Let's add another Pleasant Ridge white oak. Okay. I go back to my page here. We'll start from the very beginning. Go back to the root, search on red, or we could search on oak. I'll click on 13, Quercus rubrum, the Pleasant Ridge red oak. Okay, we'll go ahead and go into debug. We've already seen this point before. This is where we're navigating from the results page to the specimen information page. Here's our specimen page. And what I'm going to do now is we'll say latitude. We're going to say 39.24, which is roughly Cincinnati. Longitude minus 84.50, which again is roughly Cincinnati. Planted by Brandon Jones, let's say October 19th. And now I'm going to hit submit. As I hit submit, my debugger lights up because I set a breakpoint there earlier. So let's see what happens there. Okay, specimen, I'm going to highlight over this. Specimen, latitude 39.47, or 39.24, longitude 8450. Planted by Brandon Jones, planted date October 19th, and plant ID 13. And so I'm going to go to save and play. And now let's go back and take a look and see what we have in our database. You see, that didn't take very long. I click on the specimens table and take a look. Specimen ID 2, sure enough, plant ID 13. So you see the specimen ID auto increments. That is always going to be unique. The plant ID should not be null, but we can have duplicates there because that represents the many side of a one-to-many relationship. That represents the crow's feet here on our relationship. Okay. Latitude, longitude, Brandon Jones, October 19th. Everything looks good there. I did notice one thing while we did that little switch, and that is it still has, if you took a look at the page that where we were saving the specimen, it still had the data from the previous specimen that I saved. I'm going to want to look at scope. I might want to change the scope of some things here. You see that my specimen VO has session scope. That means that it's going to save these values throughout the entire time that I'm logged on to this browser session. I might want to change that to page, or honestly probably request scope, which means that we are going to create a new specimen VO object every time we access this page. Not just once. If we have, in other words, if we have it as session or application scope, session scope means every time we have a new user, we're going to create a new object of specimen DAO one time and only one time. Request scope means every time we access the page, we start with a brand new object of type specimen VO. I've taken the easy way out and made everything session so far, but I'm going to go ahead and change this one to request because I think having cached information about this specimen, that's going to end up hurting us in the long run. So anyway, I'm almost at the 30-minute mark for this video, so we're going to pick up later. We're going to maybe make the page a little prettier. We're also going to take a look at photos and see how we can associate photos with specimens. So we're going to look at how to upload, and we're going to look at how to create a DAO for the photo table. We also want to take a look at how we can see all specimens for a plant. So quite a bit more we can play with, and I will see you then. Thank you.